Hello, I'm Grace Ann Rosile. I am David Boje's colleague and also his wife. We work together and are still married. So working on these projects is one of our favorite things to do. So I'm going to talk about, David mentioned ensemble leadership, and ensemble leadership is enacted through ensemble storytelling. And so I'm going to show how we used ensemble storytelling methods along with a restorying process to create change. And I'm going to use a case example of cheating in an academic setting. And if we have time, I have a couple of other examples in different settings. So I have been a professor for many years. I'm retired now. I still teach here and there in a few places. And this was about 15 years ago. I was teaching a class of business students who were seniors. And this was the capstone business strategy class. All business students had to take this class at the end of their program as a final class. We call it the capstone class. It was required to graduate. The classes were, my class was about 45 students. And there were many sections of this class. Other people taught it. And the policy of the department was that we had to, all of those who taught that class had to use the same book and the same test bank full of multiple choice questions, and basically the same way of teaching the class for everyone. So I was given a book and told to use those tests. This picture here, I didn't get it in time. So this picture here is a picture of an angel. And you see the ring of figures below it. This was my image of teaching. I was like the guardian angel guiding my students along. They were a happy group of students. What happened was I found myself in a different story. Okay, so I found myself in this story where I am the whip-cracking, evil, mean teacher. And my students are criminals who are cheating. But some of them are the, if you know the image of the monkeys, see no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil, the sort of oblivious students. So I found myself in this situation because I had heard a rumor that in my exam, some students were cheating using their cell phones. Now you have to realize I didn't even have a cell phone at the time. And not only did my students have cell phones, they had just become popular to use text messaging. So what happened, I heard a rumor that students in my class, while they're taking the exam, would have a friend out in the hallway. And after the exam started, I posted the answers to the exam on the wall in the hallway just outside my classroom. So using text messaging, the students got a friend to go outside and to text them the answers to this multiple choice exam. And they would hold the cell phone under their desks where I didn't see it. So I had no awareness that this was happening. I heard a rumor that this was going on. And so now I'm faced with a dilemma. All these, apparently some students anyway, are cheating using cell phones and text messages. What do I do? I could do nothing. I used to feel that the best thing to do about cheating was to simply prevent it. I thought I had prevented it by having multiple exams that I changed constantly, that I Xeroxed myself, that no one could get. I didn't know about this hole. New technology created this hole in my system. So I never expected to have to deal with cheating. I didn't like this image of myself as the enforcer, the punisher. So I had a choice. I could do nothing. I could stop posting the grades outside. I liked doing that, posting the grades, because then instead of leaving with the wrong answers in their head, the students could discover the right answer very quickly when they left, and it would reinforce their learning. So I could do nothing. I could stop posting the answers, or my department head suggested this. He said he knew that a similar case had happened, and that what they did was that posted false answers to catch the people who were cheating. Well, I didn't like this because in a way it's lying myself, posting false answers. But I thought about it all weekend, and I thought, who benefits from either any of these strategies? And so I concluded that the best way to stop the cheating and to reward honest students for their hard work was to post false answers so that I knew for sure who was cheating and who was not. And I didn't punish innocent people, and I didn't accuse innocent people, and I didn't slip through the cracks some people who had cheated, and I just didn't catch them. The punishment was so severe, I thought I didn't want to risk missing some or punishing the wrong people. So I posted false answers. So I ended up failing 9 of 42 students for this cheating. Now, as I said, I didn't want to be the punisher, but I found myself in that role. So literally, I said to myself, how can I change this story? I teach re-story, and can I apply it to myself and to my own situation? And I spent a weekend thinking about what was I going to do. As I said, I decided to post the false answers. I charged these 9 students with cheating and eventually failed them. But I thought, how do I continue teaching the class? There are groups that were formed in there. There's a whole lot of things going on. And in the process of charging the students who cheated, I got their stories. I interviewed each of them, and I told them they were charged, and I heard their stories. So the stories I heard were these, that my cheating doesn't hurt anybody else, it's only me. Everybody does it. And the system is unfair. I am too busy to study, or I had an emergency and I was too busy to study. I've never done this before. All these excuse stories. So I thought about this, but what really caught my attention, when I talked to the students, I asked them to tell me who was their partner in the hallway that gave them the answers. And some of them told me it was just a friend who wasn't in the class. But one student said to me, he didn't want to tell me who the partner was because they were a good person and he didn't want them to get into trouble. So I felt like even more of a terrible punisher. I felt like all those old movies about the Nazis occupying France and the collaborators and the dedicated resistance people. And I felt like, how can I tell this student, betray your friend. So this was really the key of me restorying this whole thing. I thought about that situation. And what I finally realized was, and here we use many tools we talk about deconstructing the story. And so this whole image of teacher as authority figure and student as potential wrongdoer and subordinate and things, that's a dualism. So this dualism about I'm not going to betray my friend, and the friend is a good person, and the teacher is the bad guy, I had to re-examine that. And what I found was I looked back to my own stories that form my own values about cheating. And in a minute, I'll tell you what story came to mind. Because what I realized was, why would a friend help a friend to do something so destructive as cheat? Why wouldn't the friend help the friend be honest? And so when I looked at it that way, I realized there's a bigger story here. And there's another way to look at it. And so that's what we do. Now I'm going to go to the next slide. So my story was that I want to help the students. I didn't want to be the bad guy. And I had looked at who benefits. In using an ensemble process, I decided to collect all the stories, not just the stories of the cheaters, but what about the honest students? I realized they were left out. And in terms of deconstruction, we always ask whose voices are left out, who's marginalized. So I surveyed, well, let me go back a minute. The other thing I did was I looked at the literature and the research on cheating and what happens. What I saw was that cheating is common. In fact, there was a book called The Cheating Culture on how it pervades all aspects of life. Cheating among students has been studied many times from many angles, and there were many statistics saying that business school students were among the worst cheaters. In fact, the literature that I looked at said that the only group that cheated more than business school students were journalism students. So they said up to 86% of students, by self-admission, cheated on exams. So I deconstructed that also. And I said, what's the other side of that story? And what I realized was if 86% are cheating, just a minute, just a minute. Alexa, stop. Ask you to turn on the microphone. I'm getting, okay, I hope we're still okay.
You're back on.
Okay. So 86% of business students may have admitted to cheating at one time, but that does not mean that in any given classroom, 86% are cheating right then. And so I thought, you know, if 9 students were cheating in my class, if 1 student was cheating, probably 1 other student knew. If 9 students were cheating, surely some other students knew. So I started to broaden the picture. I got away from the simple linear cause effect. One person cheats, the teacher catches them. And I started to look at the bigger picture. What's going on here everywhere? What's the network of stories that created this particular incident? So deconstruct the literature, the knowledge that's currently out there, and look at the people whose voices weren't heard, the honest stories, as well as the students that I charged. Now, what I found then, when I collected all the stories, was that the students said, I studied all night. That student who cheated, those students who cheated, they should be thrown out of the university, not just failed from the class. So it turned out that rather than the story that the cheaters said, everybody does it, nobody else cares, even the teachers don't care, what we heard from the rest of the students in the class, the other 30-some students, was that they felt cheated. They felt treated unfairly when they worked so hard for their grades and someone cheated and got through. So there was the other side of the story. I collected all of those stories and I brought them into the classroom, printed them out on pages and passed them out to the students. When I passed them out, I started out by telling them my own views of cheating and how from when I was young, I felt like if I told a lie, my father could tell, even if he didn't do anything about it. I always felt like people knew anyway, and it wasn't worth the discomfort and the guilt. And so the same with cheating. I felt like it wasn't worth the internal stress that it would cause me. Now, I told them these stories and how I loved going to school. I loved learning. And the idea that when somebody cheats, it doesn't hurt anyone else might be questionable. Let's look at the other side of that story and what happens when a school gets a reputation for being rife with cheating. And so I told them these stories and I took all of their responses and gave them the written pages with all of their own responses of how they felt that cheating hurt them too. And when they read them, they started to talk about the comments that they saw from the other students in the class. And one student said, I was an athlete in high school and everybody cheated there, but this is more serious. This is college, and I wouldn't cheat here. One student from Yemen said how much damage corruption did in his whole culture. And students said that sometimes they felt like they just didn't know what to do. Some students identified themselves as the oblivious ones, the see no evil, hear no evil. And they didn't realize that being oblivious, they were still complicit in the cheating. They also didn't realize that some of them actually thought that I knew what was going on and didn't do anything about it. So all of these views came out. And as we talked about it, about being oblivious, about looking the other way because we weren't sure of what to do or we didn't want to get involved or it wasn't our issue, the class realized it was an issue for the whole class, not just those who cheated. So everyone was complicit in creating the story of cheating. And so if we were going to change that story, we had to do it together. And together then, the students created a different story of a culture of integrity. And this is what we came to, that we had to have a culture of integrity to be the new story. So as you can see, what we did was we took the old story and I looked at what's the ideal honest student. Not all of them are bad students. And what you want to do is take the best characterization. And we had a lot of hardworking, honest students. So, and the problem is not a student. In the restorying process, we make the problem a separate character in the story. And so I characterized the problem as the epidemic of cheating. We sympathize with why students are cheating, because it was easy to do, because they had other pressures, because what does a grade mean anyway? It can be arbitrary. Grades have been known to be unfair. We've all probably experienced the same thing. So we can sympathize and understand why cheating occurs and why it continues. Then we revise. What's the negative side? It gets to the point where we start to think about, well, what happens if the person flying my airplane cheated as they got through school? What happens if the person performing my surgery cheated when they went through medical school? Or the engineer cheated and my building might collapse. So we start to see the repercussions and the network of stories that can all be influenced by this action. And so once we see the negative side, we want to revise, we want to change all those negative things. How do we do this? The strategy. And in this case example, I used ensemble processes to change the story. And I used bringing out the hidden voices so that all of the students' voices were involved in restorying. The final thing that you want to do is, once we have the new story, that we all need to support integrity. That if we find a friend who's tempted to cheat, help them personally. Encourage them to come to the teacher. I told them the story of how students had come to me after failing the first exam, and I gave them pointers on how to study, and subsequently they ended up with an A. And I told them that any student who's having trouble in class can come and talk to me, and I can help them. I have never failed to be able to help a student figure out how to earn the grade they wanted, including an A from a terrible failure on the first exam. And so that strategy involved me playing a different role in this story. I can help them get the grade they need without risking cheating and failing. So we want to publicize that this is our new approach. And so we want, cheating tends to be a thing that is a taboo topic. And students may not even talk about it with their friends, some of them. And so one of the processes in restoring is to make it something that can be talked about and storied. So to review some of the dualisms when we deconstructed this story, we looked at cheaters and non-cheaters. We reinterpreted what was going on there. It wasn't just the bad guy, it was the whole class. We looked at what cheaters said versus what other people said. What are the honest students saying? Even the statistics can be distorted. That 87% statistic made it sound like all the students are cheating all the time, which was not happening. The exception, the little while moment, the times when I was able to help a student who was failing the class, and through studying smarter and some other study tips, they were able to get the grade they wanted. In most cases, it was an A. So we find those exceptional examples of success, and we make that the dominant story. So going between the lines, the hidden story, the lost story, is that you don't need to cheat. You can get your grade honestly, and your classmates will help you do it. And the teacher is there to help you do it. So one final thing about how the story is constructed, we like to look at ante-narrative, because the way you tell your story, it might be a simple linear cheating and punishment, simple linear cause and effect. We miss a lot that way. And so when we're deconstructing our story and looking to change our story, we might ask ourselves, are we limiting ourselves to a simple cause-effect when it's a more complex, or it could be more complex? And we might be more effective in restorying if we can break out of that crime punishment. The cyclic plot structure is that this keeps going and it gets worse and worse. So what's the impact and what's the future? The prospective sense making from storytelling. If cheaters get away with it, won't it just increase? And that's one of the reasons that I put the false answers out. The spiral, that instead of just cycling, it gets worse, but what can we do to make it get better? So at least there's more change in a spiral story structure. In using ensemble storytelling, we get the rhizomatic story, the story of the cheaters and the non-cheaters, the story that the literature tells us, the questioning of the literature, the stories of the honest students whose voices hadn't been heard. So we can look at all of those. So some references for this example are here. And we do have, I think, a few minutes left, and I can tell you how we used ensemble processes and restorying in some other settings also. We use this ensemble and restorying with a military-related organization where there were very high-tech people. These people literally were rocket scientists. And what happened was, in peacetime, in times of war, the government's happy to put money into developing new weapons and materials for the military. In times of peace, not so happy. So what was happening was, in peacetime, their budgets were being cut, and they were told, invent products that you can sell and support yourselves. Well, this was a very new thing for them, and it was very discouraging, and they felt like they were constantly being cut and not appreciated. And so in the process of restoring with them, we discovered that these people were used to being the white knights. They came in with the gadgets and the technology that helped soldiers protect them, help them do their job. In peace times, they were viewed as white elephants, just a useless expense. And so we started there, and we interviewed a lot of people. We came together, and in an ensemble process, they restoried what they were going to do and how they could, again, be the white knights that they wanted to be. We also use this method with a school lunch program locally. At the time, Michelle Obama had a program to encourage grade school students and high school students to eat more fruits and vegetables. So we went in and we talked to them about this whole idea, and people we talked to said they'll never do it. Those kids are going to eat pizza and hamburgers forever unless there's nothing else there. So we first dealt with that. What is the current situation? And we did extensive training. We had like hour-long sessions all day long, 20 people at a time. And we had to look at the current situation, and we had to look at the current story that it was impossible to change. And then we had to find those little wow moments, those unique outcomes where they had changed. And some told us their young children actually encouraged them to eat healthier because they were learning about it in school. They talked about not having those potato chips in the cupboard, different, unique things. And then after starting out by saying that you'll never do it, they came up with strategies, things that we can do that we see that other places have done and have worked, ways to put the healthier items in the front of the line, under the lights instead of back in the corner, and students take more of them. So they changed their story that way. And they did it themselves. They co-created as an ensemble. They co-created new stories and new strategies to make those stories stick. The final example is a group of agricultural workers in South Florida whose motto is, "We are all leaders." So we went there and we studied them, and we found that when they did presentations, they had equal time for men and for women. Even though the group that they represented, there was a smaller proportion of women in the fields. They're now tackling sexual harassment in the fields also. And by using ensemble processes where they're all leaders, they have been effective where no law enforcement, no other program had stopped what we call modern day slavery, except for this group. And they received a presidential award in 2015 or 2016 for their success. And this is a very inspiring example of ensemble storytelling and ensemble leadership. So now I'll answer any questions. If Artem is there, if there are questions on the...
I'm always back here. Just enjoying the webinars. Thank you so much for such a deep and yet really understandable approach to restoring. I'm just sitting here and enjoying how people take story on such a deep level, and we have several people writing about it in chat. Michelle Gabriel is talking about that your approach is very powerful, and Daria actually said that she was dreaming about such a teacher at the university. So that is sweet. Okay, so if you have any questions, guys, the chat is always for you. I have a short question before we dive into it. Oh, yeah, actually, we have one by Joanna. She's curious to know, can you use this method for solving conflicts? I presume the answer is yes, but can you go deeper?
When in solving conflicts, yes, you can. We use storytelling in many ways, but in solving conflicts, what's very helpful is a mirroring process where the conflicting parties look at how they see each other and what their stereotypes are, but they process these stories separately. So the key there is to give people a time to examine the story, decide what they accept, what is part of their own story, and what they think is not accurate. And they do a couple of steps to process this information before they come together. And when I've done this, I did this with a male and female group. It was a riot. It was really funny. I mean, they're talking about, yes, we women take a long time to get ready, but it's because you expect us to look like Playboy bunnies. And the men say, you don't have to wear all that makeup. We like you are. And so we see the conflicting stories and the triggering cycles that happen when we're not aware and we're buying into a different story. we also did this with a physical science laboratory on campus, and we had the managers, all the high-level scientists, research scientists, and their staff. And we expected that the staff would complain about having too much work to do. And when we did this storytelling process, mirroring, the staff came back and said, yes, we're overworked, but if you shared more information with us, we could be more effective in helping you. And everybody was shocked that their main thing was, let us help you more.
Ah, that's good. That's good stuff. You never know what comes until you ask for it, and people just, create the space where people can say it out loud.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Grace. And in case any more questions arise, I want to invite you to the chat and just like David, answer some of them. But I have this one last question for you. So the same as I asked David earlier. So what if a story would come to life and was about to teach the leaders one thing, but one thing only? That one thing would be?
That everyone's worthy of love. And I think I knew a journalist years ago who took it upon himself, he and his wife together, they would pick someone that they thought they were least likely to agree with. And there's so much divisiveness in the world these days. And so what they would do was get to know a particular person that they identified as least likely to agree with them and to get along with them. And they said after they got to know the person, inevitably, they liked them. So we're all human. And when we listen to the stories, it allows our humanity to emerge. And once we get to that level, we can deal with problems. They're small.
Ah, that's lovely. Thank you so much. What a great insight, and how human it is to hear it from you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Everyone, let's thank Grace Ann with our fires and the pluses and any kind of appreciation that we have. Grace Ann, it was wonderful. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.